Hello, friends. Today I want to talk to you about the new moon in Capricorn that's coming up on January 18th, and also the Human Design New Year that begins on January 22nd. So these pose two very interesting individual events, and then when we consider them together, just 4 days apart, they tell an important story. And it's a story that we've been a part of for a while here, but is continuing to unfold with more nuances and continuing to give you more opportunities to really be looking at what do you want to be carrying forward with you into the new era. What do you want to let go of? What do you want to dissolve? And then how do you want to pour your imagination and your life force energy into creating the new earth that you long for and that you would be proud to leave to future generations? And I want to speak to those of you who are really human design people. Why I have been really looking at the transits from a more astrological point of view along with human design. And the reason for that is, if you know human design very well, there is something called the prophecy of 2027. And so we're in it. Right? I mean, it's already been happening. 2027 isn't the magical year when everything changes. We've already been in lots of changes, and there'll be changes that continue for a long time coming. However, there's not a lot of detail regarding what the specifics of that are so much for us as there is in looking at it astrologically. So I wanted to bring more nuance and more of the information that we get from really looking at the different alignments that are happening in our solar system that can help us to understand what's going on for us individually and collectively, can really illuminate some of the challenges that we have and also the possibilities and the opportunities that are here as well. And astrology is really better at that than human design when we're really looking at what's going on, kind of week to week and month to month. Okay, so that's why I'm bringing this in here, because I think that it is really important for those of us as people who are really human design people to have this influence coming in to help us understand what's going on. And the human design point of view brings a lot of richness and nuance to the astrological way of thinking of it as well. So I really like the way the two of them influence and complement each other. And I just invite you to see how this can really support you in your ability to navigate the dramatic changes that we're already in and that are going to accelerate in 2026 and 2027. So that's why we're doing what we're doing here on this channel, and we've been doing really for this year, for 2025, and then going forward in 2026. Just remember that the sun and the earth enter more or less the same gates the same gates more or less on the same days every year. And so that's really, really consistent. What's not consistent is what are all the other alignments that have to do with all the other planets. And then, of course, the geometry that's going on between the planets, which is really what astrology is so incredibly brilliant at. Okay, so with that introduction, let's go ahead and get started. So this new moon in Capricorn is in the gate 60 in the human design mandala. It's also in Capricorn, and we're at the very end of Capricorn, right before we're going to be moving into Aquarius soon. And the gate 60 is a place that we actually collectively have been working with a lot for the last few years. Pluto was in the gate 60 for, in and out for about 4 years, has moved on to the gate 41 now, but that's recent because he was just in the gate 61, now in the gate 41. But we've had this kind of back and forth with Pluto in the 60 and the 41. And Pluto was the first of the outer planets to move into his new sign and into this new gate. Okay. And Pluto, of course, has a really, really long orbit. It's 248 years, so Pluto tends to hang out in a gate for a while. Now we have all the sun and the fast moving inner planets that are considered personal planets are doing this same little dance that Pluto did between this new moon in the 60 and then the human design new year in the gate 41. So I just want to give you a little heads up here, right? A little intro to say that this dance will probably feel a little bit familiar, and it's a little bit of a last chance. We're in some last chance times here as we're moving out of that old order. We're moving in. We've got an ignition point coming up in February. I'll talk more about that in a second. So as we do this, some of the themes are going to be really familiar to you, but just know that this is not we think of retrograde as kind of reverting, going back, but actually it's a spiral. We're going through layer and layer, yes, but we're in a different place every time we do it. And so the invitation here is for you to go deeper. It's to go deeper with this process. All right, let's go ahead and talk in depth about what's going on with this new moon. So this is a really kind of startling alignment, although it's been building, it's been coming. It started earlier this month, where we have the sun and the moon are always in the same gate at a new moon, right? Because we can't see the moon because it's lost in the light of the sun. But not only do we have those two in the same gate, we also have Mercury and Venus and Mars. So we have all of the personal inner planets are joining with the sun and the moon in the gate 60. So the themes that are going on with the gate 60, right? They're kind of all in the same house having a party, right? So what is this house of the gate 60? Well, the gate 60 is known as acceptance in traditional human design or conservation in quantum human design. And it is an energy, it's in the knowing circuit, it's all the way at the bottom in the root center. It's a place, I like to think of it as a place of discernment or a place of sorting, because it is a place that is saying, okay, what are all the new innovations that have come in through that knowing circuit, right? Which is highly intuitive. It is where the evolutionary impulse of humanity runs through the human design chart, is in individual circuitry, in particular in the knowing circuit. And so the 60 has that kind of energy. And the question that it asks is, what are we taking with us and what are we leaving behind? What is valuable? What is expired? What do we deem to be, a great innovation that has come through? We want to take it with us and we want to expand it and explore it and bring it in, make it a big part of our life and our world. And what are the innovations that we're like, not so much. Don't really like that one. I'm not personally bringing that forward with me, right? Although humanity is asking that question as well. But then it's also about letting go. It's also about dissolving what's expired. It's about breaking our attachments to things that really, they don't serve us anymore. Maybe they're familiar. Maybe we really relied on them in the past. But you know what? They're done, right? They're done. And so we, like I said in the intro here, we've had this experience. Pluto was in there, like I said, for like 4 years, really asking this question. And we have seen so many of the old things from the old order that Capricorn, often represents, right? Saturn and Capricorn is the old order, and it is breaking down. It's breaking down. And so we're all asked individually and collectively, and we're seeing this happen certainly in cities across the United States and in countries across the world, is there's a lot of debate about what is valuable and what's not, what's okay, what's not. We've got a lot of mayhem going on in my country. I don't know what it's like where you are. I hope it's not quite so crazy as it is here. And so our question is, are we going to carry forward this mayhem or this way of being that is here that we really don't enjoy and that we don't value and we don't want to support? And how do we break our attachment to that? Now, the tricky thing that I will just put out as part of my own process here, as I've been in this, because I'm 100% in this with you, is to say that I know I'm letting go of some of the ways that I used to, let's just say, fight the system. Okay. Very, very much of my life was involved in being very committed to justice, whether that was gender equity or whether it was financial equity or the end of, racism and xenophobia and misogyny. Right, really to say, these things are not part of the world I want to live in. And they have created dramatic inequality across the planet. And I am not in favor of that, right? I'm not an advocate for that. And so as a person who's really committed to justice, I felt it was my role. And this was, started way back when I was an academic, and my very first book is all about this, is to say, hey, look, let's wake up to the way that these power relationships have pitted us against each other, right? Made us hate ourselves, right? And have destroyed our earth. Right. And I really felt like it was a role of mine to help wake people up to these things. And I do think, I still consider that the waking up part is what I do, but I am no longer wanting to be mired in the conflict energy. I no longer want to feed the fight. And so for me, and we all make our own decisions about this, right? At this point in my life, what I know about my soul journey, it is not my job to primarily be trying to fight the power. Okay. It's about creating a world where that kind of power can no longer exist. I love what Buckminster Fuller says, right? Is that we don't want to try to fight a system. We want to create a new system that makes the old system obsolete. So for me, I'm partly letting go of my identity as that kind of an advocate for it. Well, and it's not letting go of being an advocate, but it's letting go of being like a warrior in that way, like fighting the power. I'm much more like ignore the power. Let's build something else. So that's where I am, right? I'm not going to fight the power anymore. That is not my role anymore. And so your question for yourself is, what are you going to say no to? It might be an aspect of your identity. It might be a way of how you've understood yourself. It might be a way that you've interacted with other people. It might be a way of working in the world. It might be a relationship you have with your body, right? Or the close people in your life, or where you live, or the ecosystems you're a part of. There's so many places. It's not about a particular place in which you do this in your life, but it is about engaging in the process of discernment and deciding, what do you want to conserve? It's the gate of conservation, right? And what do you want to accept and carry forward? Right. And so that's the place that we're really in right now. And remember, okay, so this is where the sun is and the moon is. Every new moon is a time for you to be setting new intentions, right? To be really thinking about, what is it I want to create? Where do I want to put my energy to this new lunation? And so we've got the sun and the moon, and they're dialoguing there, right? But then we also have the Venus, which is our divine feminine energy, or our values in human design, right? What are our values? Like for me, being a protester, being in the streets, doing direct action, that was a big part of my identity for many years. Being that kind of a person who is willing to be courageous and go into those kind of environments and stand up and be counted. I organize different kinds of direct action, right? But that is something I'm saying no more. That's not my way of being, at least not in this moment and not in this way. And so I'm updating my values around that, right? Because that was based in my values of seeing myself in a certain way in relation to the world as it existed then. But the divine feminine energy also is more about compassion. It's more about collaboration. It's more about how do we actually work together, right? So I'm really curious about, what are we bringing forward about what we've learned about collaboration so far, and about compassion and about caring, and what have we learned about that, and what are we bringing forward for us into the new earth? I outline them in my book, Feminine Sovereignty, 8 Pillars for Regenerating Ourselves in our World. And pillar number 7 is all about collaboration, right? How do we start to collaborate more with each other in ways that work for everyone, not just for the elite? But then we also have Mars there. And I'm like, Mars, who, is kind of popularly known as the god of war, because the Romans grabbed a hold of Mars and said, you're going to be our icon, right? You're going to be our archetype. But Mars doesn't have to be that way, although he tends to be invoked that way by the powers that be right now. And we have seen really martial energy happening in the planet right now, you know, the acceleration of war in a variety of different places. So there are people who are still trying to use that martial energy, the Mars energy, right, to carry forward into the new age, all of that violent dysfunction, right, of might makes right. And they're wanting to bring that forward. And so how do we, in our own ability, in our relationship to our Mars energy and the Mars energy that's coming to us, which is our agency and our sovereignty, how can we decide to leave behind that might makes right, that getting our way through anger and through coercion and through violence, which is the way that the distorted Mars can act. But really the sacred masculine isn't going to act that way. The sacred masculine is going to be more protective. It's going to be more wanting to make sure everybody gets what they need. It's more that kind of energy than, you know, I'm going to beat you up and take your stuff, including your women and your children, which is kind of historically how that's gone. And then, of course, we've got Mercury there, which is bringing voice to all of this, right? Mercury is here to help you communicate about what of these qualities you want to bring forward and what do you want to let go of in the past, and how can you dissolve your attachments, right, to things in the past that are falling away, even if you relied on them and even if they meant a lot to you. So this is a really powerful lineup that we've got here. And on top of that, we also have the Earth in the gate 56, which is the divine storyteller, which I think is awesome. Because if we think about this, here we've got Mercury, Venus, and Mars, right? And the sun and the moon all in there saying, okay, what are we taking forward with us of these archetypal energies that we care about, right? What are we leaving behind? And what story do we want to give our attention to? Let's remember that human beings have been making sense of our experience throughout time, cultures all around the world, by telling stories. And so what story can you tell that is uplifting for you, that's inspiring for you, that's empowering for you during this time while this is happening? Because remember, there are many powers that be that are out there trying to control the narrative about what's happening, right? You see it everywhere. As soon as you go on the internet, right, there is a real debate, let's say debate, about who controls the narrative. And there's a lot of energy behind trying to pit us against each other and also trying to send us into fear. And so you can do yourself and everyone around you and our world a huge favor by making the choice to tell a positive story about what we're leaving behind and what we're carrying forward that is still good, and that is innovative, and that is creative, and is powerful, and is spiritually alive, that we're bringing forward into the new era. So this image shows where this lineup is in the human design mandala, and you can see all of the planetary alignments here in that gate 60, and then you'll see right next to it is the gate 41, and Pluto is in the gate 41 and was in the gate 60 just 88 days prior. Okay, so Pluto was there and has now moved forward into the gate 41. And very, very soon, by the time we get to the Human Design New Year, a whole bunch of them have moved into the gate 41. So let's go ahead and make that transition. The Human Design New Year begins every year when the sun moves into the gate 41. And this always happens right around January 20th. This year it's January 22. And it's always around that time of year. And the reason that it is the beginning of the Human Design New Year is the gate 41 corresponds to the initiating codon of our DNA. It's like the start signal. And the start means go create proteins, basically. And I'm not a biologist, so I'm not going to give you a lot of detail about that, but it's like this go signal. start creating. It's the signal coming from our DNA to go ahead and create new, begin again. And so that's why when the sun comes there, because the sun, of course, is the greatest influence that we have in our solar system. So when the sun enters the 41, it's like, here we are, we're beginning again. Now, this new year is actually specific to human design. I don't think there are any other systems that I know of that really say we begin that. Well, Gene Keys, but Gene Keys is based in human design. So, or grew out of human design, it's a better way to say it, is this beginning sense of creating the new. So when Pluto entered the gate 41 originally in January 2024, and was there for a while, right? And then retrograded back in 2025 into the 60, and now is in the gate 41 fully and is not going to retrograde back into the 60. That we are now at the beginning of a new era that Pluto is really initiating, and it's related to Pluto in Aquarius. Now, these two gates, the 60 and the 41, they're interesting because the 60 straddles Capricorn and Aquarius. So for you astrologers there, just kind of get your mind wrapped around that. There's a few different gates that are like that. They straddle the shift of the astrological signs. But we've got this 60-41 thing going on that we were talking about before. So by the time that the sun arrives in the gate 41, Pluto's going to be there holding space saying, I've been here all along, right? The gate 41 is the gate of imagination. And I think we're mostly aware that Pluto moving into Aquarius, right? And then for us in human design into the gate 41, and there'll be other gates in Aquarius later on, but this is where we are right now, is a moment of really radical change. Because we're moving from the old order to the new order. They were ending the human design year. We're starting a new year. And Aquarius is just very different than Capricorn in energy and is all about the sovereignty of the self and the sanctity of community aligned with cosmic consciousness. I love that. This is a quote from Heather Ensworth that I keep carrying with me. So this is the energy that Pluto has already been holding when the sun arrives on the 22nd. And with the sun on the 22nd, Venus is also there. Venus is going to leave pretty soon. She got there before the sun, but he's going to leave. And then also Mercury is there. Now, Mars is a little bit behind, and it's going to catch up a little bit later in the month, but the planets are starting to split apart by this time. But we still have a big lineup happening in the gate 41. We've got the sun, we've got Mercury, we've got Venus, and we've also got Pluto. And so this is a really potent alignment. So the gate 41 in traditional human design is known as fantasy, and in quantum human design is known as imagination. Now, the idea of fantasy is really where we're living in illusions. We're deluded. We don't really know what's going on. We're just making stuff up, and we're kind of lost in that, right? That's the idea of fantasy. And that can really be very disempowering, right? When we're just living in a fantasy world and we're not grounded in reality. Whereas the imagination is really the empowered and awakened expression of the gate 41. And imagination is one of our most powerful, creative, and intuitive abilities. You know, sometimes people say things like, well, I don't know if I'm just making that up or not. And I'm like, sure, make it up. Why not? But the question is when you're making it up, is it helping you or is it not helping you, right? Are you deluding yourself? Are you living in illusion? Are you just saying that because you don't want to actually see what's actually happening? Or are you grabbing a hold of your ability to just make things up, to create what you really want in your life and to create what you want in your community and in the world? Because your imaginative ability is actually what helps you to create your own reality. You know, we hear this phrase, you create your own reality. I'm like, what does that mean? How does that work? Well, one aspect of, there's actually lots of aspects to it, but one key one is you grabbing a hold of your ability to really imagine, right? And not outsource your ability to imagine to entertainment, for example, or to the narratives that are fighting, like I just said a minute ago, to say this is really what's true, right? Not to outsource this God-given faculty that you have, but instead grab a hold of it and really use it for yourself. Really say, okay, If I could make things up any way I wanted it, if I had a beautiful fairy godmother wand, what would I do? Well, you could play with that, right? Take off the blinders, take off the limits that you've put on yourself, and start to imagine what it would look like. You can pick an area of your life or an area of the world that you really care about, whether that's something with forests or with animals or with communication between partners or whatever it is, right? Something that you care about, and really kind of challenge yourself, challenge yourself to say, how can I imagine that this is even better than it is right now? How can I imagine that it's healed, that it's whole, that it's grown, that it's blossoming, that it's even better than before, right? That something can come in that maybe you've never even thought about before, but you can bring your own life force energy in it. Now, this is right-brained creative energy, okay? It's experiential and it's embodied, so it's really not a logical thing. Don't go to logic with this, because that's not going to help. That's actually going to cut off your creative ability. What you want to do is allow yourself to step into a field of all possibilities. You probably heard this about the quantum field, or what I like to call from the yoga traditions, the Varanyagarbha, which is the great cosmic womb, right? And if you think of the cosmic womb, right, it's the place from which everything comes, pure potentiality. So when you move into pure potentiality, which is the goal really of many meditation traditions, is what do you do there? Well, you start to imagine that things are the way that you really desire in your own life, in your own body, in your own relationships, in your work in the world, maybe in the location that you live, right? Something that's close in. But then you can really expand it out to your community, your city, where you live, your different relationships with people. Right? You can expand it out into the living world. And remember, you're going to have Venus here, who is going to say, how on track are you with the values that you really care about? Do you need an upgrade or an update in your values? How can you imagine your life being spun around the values that you choose for yourself, right? And then how do you give voice to that with Mercury saying, giving voice to your imaginations, your possibilities. You know, we've been so programmed to really just look at 3D reality, just look at density, just look at form. We've been so programmed to do that and think that everything else is, just made up. But that we do such a disservice to ourselves and to each other when we think that way, because it's just not how it works. Everything is created as energy first before it comes into form. How do things get created as energy? Well, when it comes to human beings, it gets created with our thoughts and our imagination, right? And so this is an opportunity for you to really grab a hold of that ability and take command of your life more and more with it. You're going to have Pluto as an ally that's going to help you just burn down the old fantasies, burn down the old things that don't work for you anymore, and give you energy to rebirth, right? That phoenix energy of Pluto to KSA. From the ashes, we're going to bring forth this new with our powerful imaginations. You're going to have Venus to say, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it with love. We're going to do it with our hearts. We're going to do it with a deep sense of caring and compassion and collaboration and cooperation, and this deep sense of unity consciousness that we are all in this together. And then you're going to have Mercury saying, you know what? You can communicate about this. You can speak about this. You can write about it. You can sing about it. You can draw about it. You can paint about it. You can have conversation about it, right? And then you're going to have the sun saying, we're bringing lots of energy in here. We're shining the light of the most powerful celestial being in our field, right? Into our imaginations. It's potent, right? So my invitation to you is to really grasp a hold of this opportunity. And to support you with that, I'm going to do a live stream here on YouTube on January 22nd. And if you're part of my community, then you'll have the opportunity to come and ask questions about that as well. Or you can just check it out on YouTube if you prefer to just do that. So I'm excited about that because I always feel very energized by the Human Design New Year. And it's very specific to our particular practice with human design. So I hope that you'll come and check it out and participate if that calls to you, or watch the replay later on YouTube. That'll also be preparation for us for the Ambassador of the Future workshop that's now happening on January 31st. I needed to shift the date a little bit. And so that's happening on the 31st. So the 22nd will be an opportunity for you to get a sense of a little bit more about what that workshop is about. And if you'd like to participate in it, and also just an opportunity to come and celebrate this new year and have an opportunity to do a practice that helps to open up your imagination, and for us to come together as a community. So these are really potent events right next to each other. And like I said, one is really about what are we letting go of the old, right? That new moon. I mean, it's kind of odd because it's a new moon, which is usually a beginning, but we got to let go in order to really have space for the new beginning that we're leaning into. And then when we come to the Human Design New Year, that's a really new beginning, right? That gate 41 is, like I said, it's the initiating codon. It's this energy behind the beginning of the Human Design New Year. And it's also mirrored throughout the solar system, because we've got Jupiter, who's now in the gate 53, which is the gate of starting things. And then in February, we're going to have the alignment of Neptune and Saturn in Aries, which happens in the human design world in the gate 25 third line on the 15th of February, but in astrology happens on the 20th. But it's right in there. And then we're going to have another new moon in Aquarius, which is also the beginning of the year of the fire horse that's happening in February. So that's a super potent time as well. So what we're doing here during this kind of mid-January time is helping us get ready for an even bigger ignition point that's going to be happening next year. And just as a positive thing that I want to offer to you as we end this particular video for today, more to come, is that the year of the fire horse last happened in 1966. 60 years ago. That's how the cycle of the Chinese astrology works. And the fire horse is really about power, dynamism, freedom, fast moving energy. Well, get this. We have a trine that's happening between Uranus and Pluto, which is a really beautiful energy that happened. The seed point for that was 1965, 1966, which was the beginning of the peace and love era. And so that was also the beginning of the year of the fire horse in 1966, and it got it started. I'll be talking more about that in the workshop happening on the 31st, because we're going to be leaning into that energy in February. But just to say here, there's a lot of positive energy coming. And it's important for you to come inside yourself so that you can tune into the spiritual news instead of the human news. Although I have to say, there's a lot of really good human news happening as well. You just don't see so much of it, certainly in the mainstream news. But just to say, tuning in to these really auspicious and potent things that are happening. And it's not always easy, okay? Just because it's auspicious doesn't mean that it's always easy or it's always comfortable, it's always pleasant. It just means it's a potent time for us around our spiritual growth, which has a lot of blessing embedded in it when we are willing to dive in and take advantage of what's being offered. So I hope you'll put January 22nd. It's going to be at noon Pacific time, which is 8 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, in the UK. So you can do the conversion for yourself. And then we have the workshop, Ambassador of the Future, that's happening on Saturday, the 31st. The official registration for that will open really soon. I got a little behind because I was under the weather for a little bit. But that registration will be coming up really soon. You can, however, still join the waitlist, which is the registration for that will be down below. And then you'll be the first to know when registration opens and to hear about all the goodies that I'm putting together for you for Ambassadors of the Future. I'm really excited about bringing that forward because being an ambassador of the future is really about being able to be in command of your own inner state, which is a state of sovereignty, but then to move through the world really being in a state of cooperation and collaboration and caring with the people around you. So it's both, right? We need all of that. So those are a couple of live events that are coming up soon. I would love to get to meet you on the 31st and, do some deeper work with you if you feel like I'm a good person for you. All right, my friends, many blessings, much love. And I'll be back with another video real soon. Bye for now.